Hi guys, welcome back. Today I'll be giving you my spoiler review and full breakdown of the horror mystery film Scream 7. Scream 7 was directed by Kevin Williamson, who is better known as a writer for the Scream franchise. The main cast of this film includes Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott, now Sydney Evans, Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers, Isabel May as Tatum Evans, and Matthew Lillard as Stu Mocker. This film takes place mostly in the fictional town of Pine Grove in Indiana, when a new Ghostface killer emerges in the town where Sidney Prescott has built a new life. Her darkest fears are realized as her daughter becomes the next target. To protect her family, Sidney must face the horrors of her past to put an end to the bloodshed once and for all. So if you haven't seen this film yet, this is your spoiler warning, because from this point on, I'll be breaking down everything. The things I enjoyed the most about this film is how it starts with the opening sequence, because straight away at the Mocker house, and it's been turned into a horror experience for Stab, with merchandise everywhere and even murder outlines from the original killings on display, which took us back to the first Scream film. This scene is also a good example of how the movie leans heavily into references to the earlier films, something long-time fans will probably appreciate, although it also shows how much the movie relies on nostalgia throughout the story. We then see Scott and Madison taking part of the experience. They then get a fake Ghostface call, and Madison gets a jump scare from an animatronic Ghostface. So at first it feels staged and set up as part of the experience. We hear for the first time from Scott about the theories that Stu had survived since the original Ghostface killings, and we also get references to Scream 5 as they mention Amber's death. But everything changes when Madison gets an unknown phone call that clearly isn't part of the experience. While Madison is looking for Scott behind her, in the background, in the shadows, we see a ghost face, but it is Scott in the costume, and that misdirect works really well as Scott is then killed by the real ghost face. And as Madison runs away, we see the moment in the trailer as she runs around the house, and Ghostface and Madison end by falling over the balcony, and she falls straight onto the knife Ghostface is holding, which goes right into her stomach. It's brutal and it happens so quick. Ghostface then sets the house on fire as well as Madison and just casually walks out. The film then cuts to Tatum in her bedroom, and I like that shift because it brings us back to Sydney's family. Tatum's boyfriend Ben climbs through her window, which is a clear callback to Billy Loomis in the original. Moments like this continue the film's pattern of mirroring scenes from the earlier movies, which helps connect the new characters to the legacy of the franchise. Unfortunately for Ben, Sidney knows he's there, and you can really feel the protective tension, especially when we find out Sidney doesn't trust him and wants Tatum not to trust completely, due to Sidney's past. We then meet Mark, Sidney's husband, and they have a funny conversation about what just happened between Sidney, Tatum and Ben. The next morning we see more of Sidney's life now. We find out Mark is the chief of police and their younger kids are staying with their grandma. We then see Tatum walk into the kitchen, who has found Sidney's leather coat from Scream 3, and Sidney is not happy about it. Tatum wants to talk to her mum about the past, but Sidney shuts it down. We see Sidney go to work, and she now works at a cafe. And that's where we meet Lucas, who wants to start a crime podcast about her past. His mum Jessica is clearly not happy about this obsession, and we find out they're Sidney's neighbours, which becomes important later. We are also introduced to Tatum's friends, Hannah and Chloe, and we see Ben giving Tatum and her friends a lift to rehearsals for their stage play. During the rehearsals, the teacher has a go at Tatum about her acting and even mentions Sidney, saying he wishes she was more like her mother. Backstage, Tatum decides to test Ben to see if he's a good boyfriend by asking him what he likes about her, and he answers well, which makes him seem genuine. Around this time, Ghostface calls Sydney, and during a FaceTime call on her computer, we see an older Stu with scars. It's a creepy moment and a strong visual callback for the fans of the original film, although the heavy use of deepfake technology in the story might divide audiences, since it becomes a major part of the mystery later on. Sydney immediately calls Mark to get him to the theatre and protect Tatum. I also enjoyed it when the theatre sequence happens, because this one is one of the most creative kills in the film. A tech student helping Hannah rehearse is killed backstage, which leaves Hannah stuck up in the air on the rigging. Ghostface then starts moving her around above the stage, and she swings past multiple times, and he cuts her over and over again. You literally see her guts hanging when she finally stops. It's horrible but memorable. Once Sydney arrives, Ghostface runs off. After that, the police question everyone, including Chloe, and Tatum points out Chloe wasn't even there at the time. And we see the teacher talking to the police, saying he is disappointed as they haven't got an understudy to replace her. Suspicions start building, and Sydney begins to suspect Ben, but Tatum insists he's not Billy. The cops check Sydney's house and lock it up, but Ghostface is already inside, hiding in the loft like we saw in the trailer. There's a really tense sequence where Ghostface moves around the house, eventually holds Tatum at knife point. Mark kicks him and they fight, and it ends with Mark falling down the stairs. Sydney then hits Ghostface in the face with a baseball bat. Sydney and Tatum then go into a hidden safe room which takes them into the walls of the house. We get the knife through the wall moment from the trailer, and Sydney even bends the knife with the bat. As they leave the house, Mark sneaks up on Ghostface, and the fight continues outside until Gail turns up and hits Ghostface with her car. Mindy and Chad from Scream 5 and 6 are also with her. We find out under the mask is a man called Carl Gibbs, someone we briefly saw at Sydney's cafe earlier. We find out it's been in a psychiatric facility. The reveal works as a mid-film twist, although because Carl was only briefly introduced early in the cafe, the unmasking doesn't carry quite the same impact as some of the more personal Ghostface reveals from earlier films in the franchise, and it doesn't feel finished. The parts I loved after that are how the mystery of the killer keeps expanding. Lucas shows up and is clearly still obsessed, especially after seeing Gail. They reconvene in the house, and we find out Mindy and Chad have been learning from Gail about becoming reporters. There's mention of lost and stolen paperwork about Stu's body, which brings back the theory that he survived. After another call from Stu, Sydney decides she wants to go to the psychiatric hospital first, and Gail responds with, "There she is," recognizing that she's fully stepped back into the world again. At the hospital, we learn Carl was violent and killed 3 people, and at first seems like there's no big connection, but then we find out Stu has been listed as an unknown John Doe and was released from the hospital 2 weeks ago, which changes everything. Tatum talks to Mindy and Chad about their past with Ghostface, and when Tatum says it's not her boyfriend, they jokingly say, "That's cute." Sydney agrees to give Gail her first proper interview since 1996 to bait Stu into cooling. Meanwhile, Mark hears a noise at home in the garage that is having work done to it and checks it out. Ghostface is there and attacks him using the plastic sheeting. Tatum gathers everyone at the Parks Tavern, a bar that Chloe's family work at. Mindy goes through the rules again and questions everyone with Chad. Sydney and Gail use a local news studio for the interview. Gail calls Stu a bitch and says Billy was the real mastermind. But as the interview progresses, Sydney starts to not like Gail's questions. But Sydney still gets a call from Stu, showing her he is outside Parker's Tavern. At the bar, Ben shows Tatum he created a deep fake of Stu on his computer in his car. So Tatum assumes it's him and knocks him out, which to me almost makes it too obvious that he can't be a Ghostface. Everything then starts to change as Chloe is attacked in the kitchen of the bar by Ghostface, and in the struggle, Chad is accidentally stabbed by Chloe. And then both Chad and Mindy get stabbed again by Ghostface. Chloe hides behind the bar, but is dragged onto it and killed. Lucas is then killed by Ghostface by being lifted onto a beer pump that is spike-shaped. We then cut back to Tatum, who is running down the street as Ghostface chases her, but he suddenly disappears when she hides behind the cinema entrance. One small thing I did notice during this moment is the way the scene is shot, almost making it feel more like a TV drama than a big cinematic horror experience, especially with the lighting and camera angles during the chase. Ben then shows up and is killed shortly after. Tatum makes it to Sydney's cafe. Sydney tells her about the gun in the office, but Ghostface still enters as he somehow knows the code to the cafe. Sydney watches Tatum on the office camera via her phone as we see Ghostface looking for Tatum. And finally, the last parts I enjoyed are when we find out that the code to the safe in Sydney's office is Tatum's birthday. Sydney quickly teaches her how to use a gun, and Tatum puts some earplugs in and says, "So point and shoot." Sydney tells her to shoot through the wall at Ghostface's chest as he is on the other side. She does, and Ghostface drops, but he is not dead, and he attacks Tatum. She then hits him in the head with a fire extinguisher, but another Ghostface appears, and they take her. They call Sydney and tell her they won't hurt Tatum until she gets there. Sydney returns home, and all the TVs are playing deep fake videos of Stu, Mrs. Loomis, Roman, and even Dewey. Sydney finds Tatum tied to a chair, like Steve in the original. Sydney is told to drop her gun, but unknown to the Ghostfaces, she has another one hidden behind her back. One killer is revealed to be the psychiatrist from the hospital where Carl was admitted. And after it is revealed that Mark is still alive, the other Ghostface is revealed to be Jessica, Lucas's mum and Sydney's neighbour. Jessica says she read Sydney's book and became obsessed, killed her husband, and wanted to become part of Sydney's story, but changed her mind and wants to start a new story with Tatum as the new Sydney, and accuses Sydney of being past her prime. While Jessica is talking, Mark releases Tatum's leg from the chair, and Tatum then headbutts Jessica while she's distracted. Sydney shoots the psychiatrist and goes after Jessica in the house. Tatum calls the hospital, and we cut to Jessica and Sydney fighting in the house. Tatum then appears and shoots Jessica. Sydney and Tatum then shoot Jessica multiple times in the face to make sure she's dead. Sydney asks Tatum how she feels, and Tatum replies, "How do I feel? I'm Sydney Prescott's daughter." And Sydney finally responds to Jessica's comment from earlier about her being past her prime, and simply replies, "Fuck you." We find out Mindy and Chad survive again and are taken away in an ambulance. Sydney and Gal hug it out, and it ends with Sydney finally opening up to Tatum about her past. What I really loved about this film are the way it embraced the legacy of the franchise while still evolving the story through Sydney's daughter, creating a strong passing of the torch dynamic between the two. The callbacks to the original murders and the film's playful meta-commentary all feel true to the spirit of Scream, while modern elements like media obsession and nods to social technology update those themes for a new generation. The tension in the home invasion scenes, the theatre sequence, the bar chaos, the wall fight, and the final confrontation are some of the film's standout moments. Seeing Sydney train her daughter to survive while still carrying out her own trauma as emotional weight beyond the kills, and the dual Ghostface reveal with their obsession-driven motives tie neatly back into the franchise's long-running ideas about influence, fame, and legacy. The parts that could have improved it, however, are mainly the pacing and how many twists and plot elements are layered into the story. A few key issues I have with it are the fact that it relies too much on speculation that Stu, Matthew Lillard, survived, throwing new but now fake information out there such as him being a John Doe in the asylum, the burning down of the original house, and even one of the ghost faces doing Stu's signature hand over head stab movement. For me, it sometimes felt that the film was building up the expectation that Stu might actually return in a big way, which made the reveal that it's mostly part of the killer's manipulation feel slightly underwhelming. However, it seems some truth may have come out of it, with hope for fans of Stu, and the files to do with his body are missing, so in a future film, who knows what could happen. The heavy use of deepfake technology to create the illusion of Stu is also an interesting idea, but at times it felt like the film relies on the concept a little too much, instead of building the mystery in a more traditional way. While the nods to technology and deepfakes help modernise the story, the film sometimes leans on them too heavily, making some twists feel exaggerated or convenient. Another issue for me is that the Ghostface reveals themselves don't hit quite as strongly as some of the earlier films in the franchise, because all three Ghostfaces aren't developed as much earlier in the story. The final unmasking doesn't carry the same level of shock or emotional weight that we've seen with the past killers, like Billy and Stu, Mrs. Loomis, or Jill. A few characters could have benefited from more development. With so many suspects and subplots, the narrative can feel slightly crowded at times. Some of the supporting characters also don't get much time to really stand out, which means when certain deaths happen, they don't always land as emotionally as they could have. There are also moments where the film moves very quickly between attacks, twists, and reveals, which means certain plot ideas, like the hospital connection, the deep fake setup, and the killer's overall plan, could have benefited from a bit more time to breathe and be explained. Another small issue I noticed is that some scenes visually feel like they belong in a television episode rather than a cinematic horror film. For example, the moment where Tatum is running from Ghostface through the streets is the clearest example of this, where the lighting and camera style make the sequence feel slightly less cinematic than some of the more memorable chase scenes from earlier films in the franchise. Even so, the film remains tense, entertaining, and self-aware, enough to make most of those choices work within its meta framework, which is why, for those reasons, I'll be giving this film a 6 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming future content, and I'll see ya in my next video.
Make everyone you love suffer, including your pretty daughter.
Don't you fucking dare!